Hello, this is Lindsay Drangeid, and this is my assignment number 4 for effective instruction on an instructional area of challenge. The way it's broken down is just starting off with the description of the assignment, mostly for my own uses. My impressions of looking through the self-audit from Marzano's Becoming a Reflective Teacher, identifying my own most significant areas where I could be doing a little bit better. Brief comment on just the stages in my career on the improvement of monitoring student learning and adjusting accordingly. Got 2 examples of circumstances where I could have done a little bit better to monitor student learning and to adjust what I'm doing. And I'm going to finish off with just a happy example. So I won't belabor the assignment. Again, this is mostly just for my own reference here. In looking at the reflective practice teacher scale that is in Marzano's book, it is broken down into 3 main segments involving routine events, addressing content, and things that you do on the spot. That is broken down further into 41 self-analysis questions. And in reading through these questions, it was a little daunting at first because it just felt like there was so much that I was doing that wasn't quite adequate. But that's an important stage to go through to start looking at it more dispassionately. Got to get past that, the emotional stage of it. My most significant areas for growth that I could self-identify were these. Being clear about my learning goals, being more intentional about tracking student progress. Really everything is about being more intentional. Managing how students respond, and really being a little bit more methodical about understanding my students as humans. So here are my areas. First of all, I need to, with every unit of study, just start off with some time spent and a list, a reference list, of really specifically what the goals are for the unit. Need to come back to that list more often. This is something I do, but not in a very formal manner, so that could stand some improvement. In tracking student progress, I definitely am making use of assignments and quizzes and tests to see how students are doing, but I really need to break that down more into specific areas, and most importantly, need to have a better way to convey exactly what students are doing and right and what they need to work on more, to share it with them. With the response rates, I rely a little too much on just kids talking. I need to pay more attention to who's responding, keep better track of it, and then come up with ways that, and there are a variety of methods that have shown to be really effective on really making sure that students respond. And response can look like a lot of different things, but just not to leave it up to chance. I do get to know my students. I start off the year with a survey, but I could do a lot better. Again, this all just comes down to being more intentional, more deliberate, just to see how they're doing. That could be a daily check, weekly check, but just something that allows them to express how they're feeling about class, how they're feeling about topics, just how they're feeling about life in general. And I do this somewhat haphazardly, but if I do it more as a regular process, it should be the sort of thing that goes pretty quick. That lets me just find out a bit more about my students. So I think back to my first year teaching, and quite a few of my response strategies involved the same strategy that deer employ when they're crossing a road. Part of that is when you're brand new, you know your content, but you're not very good at understanding where other people are going to have problems. And that's where you learn that just because I understand something doesn't automatically mean that I can articulate it satisfactorily so that a student gets it, so to speak. As my experience grew, I got better at anticipating trickier areas. I got better at articulating what I am teaching, being very, very clear. And really the last most liberating step that allowed me to be better, allows me to be better constantly, is just not worrying about not knowing everything. Now, you don't want to not know anything, because they're going to question your ability to do your job. But on that occasion, when you don't know and you're just not sure about something, you pause, you give it a try, you think about it, but you never give any BS about it. And I think people in general respect when you don't try to stumble your way through something and just use a lot of bluster to distract, and just fess up that you don't know this yet, but you're going to find out. It's also a good example that just not knowing and mistakes and correction are something that isn't to be avoided. It's part of the process of learning and getting better. And again, you don't want to be constantly wrong about things, because then they're going to wonder why you got hired. So my first example that came to mind was teaching these devices called Atwood's machines. Here are a couple examples of what they look like. An Atwood's machine is two masses connected by a rope or string looped over a pulley, and there can be a whole bunch of different configurations. So I teach about these in both General and AP Physics 1. And I used to think that I should just start with what I thought was the simplest example, which is the example that you see at the upper example, the two vertically hanging masses. But as it turned out, that when you had different configurations, I was describing separate rules for all of them, even though there was some commonality in the rules. It kind of disconnected all these different configurations from each other, and this caused a lot of confusion, even with kids who were trying real hard and are pretty bright. And this, I was just kind of really frustrated, not with my students, but just the process of why this was going so tough. And I realized that the big issue was just that it was memorizing 4 different examples when really they were all just variations on the same theme. And I developed this generalized formula. I happened to develop it independently, but in looking more of course, this is something that has existed for quite a long time. But it's one way to think about it that accommodates all the different variations that anybody could ever come up with. And it transformed it significantly. So what I could have done better, I could have been a little clearer about outlining exactly what was going to be expected of them. This happens in a lesson, but need to be more deliberate about it. Need to go back and look at how I'm monitoring student progress and really decide what are the different categories that I should keep track of, and to share that with students. This probably would have led to this change in how I teach it much sooner. But we live and we learn. My second example has less to do with teaching a specific lesson and more with relating to a specific student. This is a student I had in both Advanced Placement Physics 1 and 2. And he's not a bad kid, but he had a bunch of bad habits. He really was always trying to find a shortcut, was constantly doing other work in class, and got tired of his kind of blowhard nature. He was always kind of self-promoting. And I focused more on the things that I didn't like rather than focusing on how I could help this student. And it ended up all right, but it would have ended up better sooner if I had been more deliberate about monitoring what this student was doing and adjusting my approach to dealing with them. So it's not a lesson specifically, but that's what would have done better. And this is where that individual progress check comes into play, especially if it's a routine, you're having a conversation and you just say, hey, these are the things that are going well for you, these are the things that you could work on. It ends up being non-threatening, it's constructive, also checks in on just how they're doing in life. And going back to this idea of just being better with all my students, of finding out more about them. The last example is, ending on a happy note, is happened in the hospital. So I was just in the hospital from the 2nd to the 6th, and sprung loose, well, last night. I'm recording this on the 7th. So I was in the hospital, and just through conversation, with people who are caring for you, they end up asking what you do for a job. And there was a nursing student on the floor who heard that I teach physics, and he asked if he could come in and ask some questions. He had an exam the next day at the U of M, and it was on magnetism, and he was just saying what just was really giving him a hard time. And we were writing diagrams on the little board that's normally reserved for when your doctor's names and release dates and what any dietary restrictions are. And we were doing diagrams, and I pulled up my lessons that I did. I have this really great video clip that's 70 years old that shows this phenomenon when you have current carrying wires near each other. And as we were talking about it, it dawned on me a better way to describe what's going on than what I had used in class before, which worked, but it was a little abstract, and it kind of felt like it was a new rule they were learning, when in reality, the way to describe this involved a primary rule that we use to describe interaction between magnetic fields and moving charged particles. So with this insight, I had my computer with me so I could do work, As soon as he left, I went back and spent probably about half hour changing how I am going to teach this for the rest of my career. New diagrams, new descriptions, and I'm set for next year. Already taught it for this year, went okay, but next year will be better. So that is the end of my happy story, which is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.